June 17, 1994. If you were in America, you remember exactly where you were, because 95 million people were doing the exact same thing. They stopped cooking. They stopped working. The NBA Finals were completely interrupted. Everyone was absolutely glued to a glowing box. What could possibly captivate the entire nation at once? An alien invasion? A presidential emergency? Not quite. They were watching a white Ford Bronco driving down Interstate 405 in Los Angeles. But it wasn't a high-speed action movie chase. It was crawling along at a bizarrely slow speed of 35 miles per hour. Behind this solitary white SUV trailed a massive parade of police cruisers, their lights flashing silently on the screen. Above them, a swarm of news helicopters circled like metal buzzards, broadcasting every single inch of the asphalt live to the world. This was the O.J. Simpson highway chase, a surreal, slow-motion event that completely paralyzed the country and broke television viewership records. To give you an idea of the madness, Domino's Pizza reported record-breaking delivery sales. Nobody wanted to step away from their TV sets, not even for dinner. For hours, the nation held its collective breath, watching a vehicle literally just driving within the speed limit. It sounds completely absurd today. A slow car on an empty freeway. Why the obsession? Why the absolute hysteria? Because of who was inside that white Bronco. It wasn't just a suspect. It was a beloved national treasure. It was a man whose smiling face had sold rental cars and entertained millions on Sunday afternoons. This bizarre 60-mile drive didn't just end a legacy. It fundamentally rewired the DNA of American media. But to understand how we got to this surreal highway parade, we have to rewind and look at the man himself. To understand the sheer magnitude of the highway chase, you have to realize who O.J. Simpson was back then. He wasn't just a sports star. He was a generational phenomenon on the football field. He shattered rushing records, won the prestigious Heisman Trophy, and became an absolute legend. But his fame didn't stop when he hung up his cleats. He seamlessly transitioned into Hollywood. He starred in blockbuster comedy movies and sprinted through airports in iconic rental car commercials. He had a $1 million smile and a charisma that completely transcended race and class. In the eyes of the American public, he was the ultimate personification of the American dream. Everyone loved him. He was invited to the most exclusive golf courses and lived in a massive mansion in Brentwood. He was wealthy, charming, and seemed absolutely untouchable by the normal rules of society. He was so famous, his nickname was simply the Juice, and the public couldn't get enough. Imagine a modern superstar, say LeBron James, crossed with Tom Hanks. That was his level of fame. So when you picture this man, you picture a hero made of pure gold, flawless in the public eye. But pedestals are dangerous places to stand, because the higher you are, the harder you fall. And in the summer of 1994, that flawless golden image was about to shatter into 1 million pieces. A horrific tragedy was about to unfold, turning the nation's hero into its most wanted fugitive. On the night of June 12, 1994, the peaceful quiet of an upscale Los Angeles neighborhood was abruptly shattered. Yellow police tape went up. Flashing red and blue lights illuminated the darkness. A major, tragic crime had occurred. Two individuals, Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman, tragically lost their lives. It was a devastating, heartbreaking event. As investigators combed the area, they were searching for answers. Who could have done something so terrible? Then, they found a critical piece of evidence. A single, dark leather glove left behind at the scene. Now, in any normal investigation, a piece of evidence is just a starting point for detectives to follow. But this glove eventually led detectives to a suspect that nobody in America wanted to believe. The evidence pointed directly at the Golden Boy. The news leaked to the press and the media exploded. The public was in absolute shock. Every channel scrambled to cover the completely unimaginable story. People simply couldn't comprehend how the juice could be connected to this. It did not compute in the American mind. It was literally like hearing Mickey Mouse had robbed a bank. The brain just rejected the information, but the evidence was there. By June 17th, the authorities had enough. They officially drew up a warrant for his arrest. His high-powered lawyers made an agreement with the police. OJ would turn himself in quietly that morning. A deadline was set, 11 a.m. The police waited patiently for the icon to walk through their doors. The clock ticked past 11, then 11:15. The door stayed closed. The juice had vanished. Imagine being the police chief right then. You just lost the most recognizable, famous man in the entire United States. Panic immediately set in at the LAPD headquarters. Phones were ringing off the hook, and paperwork was flying everywhere. How does a 6'2", globally famous superstar just vanish into thin air? It was logistically baffling. By 2 p.m., the police were forced to call a massive emergency press conference to address the unprecedented situation. The LAPD stood before the cameras and made a stunning announcement. The national hero was officially a fugitive. The word fugitive flashed across every television network. The story instantly shifted from a local crime to a nationwide manhunt. But because this story couldn't possibly get any more bizarre, another twist was introduced just a few hours later. The note. His friend and attorney, Robert Kardashian, stood before the news cameras and read a handwritten letter left behind by the star. The letter was rambling and highly emotional. It ended with the haunting words, "Don't feel sorry for me. I've had a great life." To the millions listening live, it sounded exactly like a final goodbye. The tension in the country reached an absolute boiling point. So now, the police are desperately searching for a man whose face is literally plastered on billboards across the entire city. A massive manhunt was launched. Police helicopters swept the city, scanning the streets of Los Angeles from above. Detectives checked airports, train stations, and hotels. Every single officer in the state was looking for the fallen golden boy. But he wasn't fleeing the country on a private jet. He was still in Los Angeles, riding quietly in the back of a vehicle. As the sun began to set on the West Coast, the police finally received the 911 call that would change television history. A motorist traveling on Interstate 5 dialed police from his giant car phone. He was looking right at a white Ford Bronco. The license plate matched. It was the exact vehicle authorities had been frantically searching for all day. Dispatch instantly lit up. Police units from all over the area were ordered to converge on the highway in Orange County. A patrol cruiser quickly caught up to the SUV. The officer was preparing for a high-stakes, intense confrontation. But the man behind the wheel wasn't the suspect. It was his longtime friend and former teammate, Al Cowlings. Cowlings, terrified and sweating profusely, shouted out the window that his friend was in the back seat and was highly unstable. The fallen icon was hiding in the rear of the vehicle, reportedly holding a dangerous object and demanding to see his mother. Hearing this, the police backed off immediately. Instead of forcing the car off the road, they simply turned on their lights and followed. And so began the most bizarre pursuit in law enforcement history. A high-stakes chase that absolutely refused to break the speed limit. It was less like a dramatic police takedown and much more like a heavily guarded VIP escort moving at a crawl. As the convoy crept onto the 405 freeway, local news helicopters caught wind of the spectacle and rushed to the sky above. In newsrooms across the country, network executives had a massive decision to make. Do they interrupt regular scheduled programming? Over on NBC, Game 5 of the NBA Finals was happening. They actually shrunk the basketball game into a tiny box in the corner so the white Bronco could take over the entire main screen. Sports fans and news junkies were suddenly watching the exact same broadcast. The pursuit had officially transformed from a local police matter into a national, live televised mega event. But here is where the story shifts from a tense police pursuit into something entirely unprecedented in television history. The police weren't trying to ram the car or force it off the road. They were just orderly following it. It was, without a doubt, the slowest, most polite, and most heavily guarded getaway attempt in human history. News anchors were forced to fill hours of live airtime, essentially just narrating a man's evening commute. There were no crashes, no tight turns, no action movie stunts, just miles and miles of empty asphalt. Remember, this was 1994. Before social media, word of mouth spread through millions of landline phone calls. "Turn on the TV right now," was the phrase echoing from coast to coast, pulling everyone into the shared experience. People literally canceled their Friday night plans. The entire nation was collectively holding its breath in living rooms everywhere. As the slow-motion parade dragged on, the late afternoon turned into evening. The golden California sun began to set. The white Bronco drove endlessly along the Los Angeles freeways, creating a strange, poetic, and tragic visual. But then, the news cameras captured something along the sides of the freeway that nobody could have predicted. As the convoy approached the overpasses, the streets weren't empty. At first, it was just a few curious locals, people who had driven to the freeway bridges just to get a glimpse. Some even brought handmade signs. But within minutes, a few people turned into dozens, and then dozens turned into hundreds. The highway overpasses were physically transforming into packed, cheering grandstands. A police manhunt had become a bizarre sports parade. It was a completely surreal disconnect. A man is wanted for a devastating crime, and people are treating it like the Super Bowl. Fans were literally chanting, "Run, OJ, run," as if he was trying to score a touchdown instead of fleeing the police. Motorists actually stopped their own cars on the shoulder of the freeway, climbing onto their roofs to wave as the convoy passed. Some enterprising locals even started selling souvenir T-shirts right there on the side of the road as the chase was happening. To the people on the bridges, this wasn't reality anymore. It was an interactive television show playing out right in their backyard. The split-screen reality was jarring. Somber news anchors reporting a tragedy on one side and a chaotic, festive tailgate party on the other. But the party couldn't last forever. The slow-motion convoy was finally nearing its intended destination. After traveling roughly 60 miles across the Los Angeles area, the white Bronco finally took an exit off the 405 freeway. It left the massive concrete freeway and entered the quiet, wealthy, tree-lined streets of Brentwood, the exact same neighborhood where the tragedy had occurred just days prior. The circle was closing. The massive police convoy followed closely behind, their flashing lights violently illuminating the manicured lawns and tall trees. But the crowds had beaten them there. Hundreds of people were already swarming the local streets, completely blocking the path. The police were rapidly losing control of the perimeter. The sheer volume of spectators was making a highly volatile situation incredibly dangerous. Finally, just before 8 p.m., the white Ford Bronco parted the sea of people and turned into a familiar driveway. It slowly rolled up to the doors of his Rockingham estate, and the engine was turned off. But the night wasn't over, not even close. The highway chase was over, but the drama had simply moved to a new stage. A tense, agonizing 45-minute standoff began in the driveway. Dozens of specialized officers completely surrounded the property, but they were explicitly ordered to hold their ground and not rush the vehicle. Al Cowlings emerged from the driver's seat. He acted as the frantic middleman, pleading with the police to give his friend some space. Crisis negotiators got on the phone, speaking with the suspect directly, trying to talk him down from the ledge of a terrible decision. And above them all, the helicopters didn't leave. They trained their massive searchlights directly onto the parked vehicle. For nearly an hour, America literally stared at a parked car. Nobody changed the channel. The suspense was simply agonizing. Outside the gates, the chaotic, partying crowd finally fell silent, waiting to see how this unbelievable night would end. Then, at 8:45 p.m., the tension finally broke. The back door of the Bronco slowly clicked open. The fallen icon stepped out into the night air. The golden boy of American sports was finally surrendering. In a strangely polite arrangement, police allowed him to enter his home, use the bathroom, and drink a glass of juice before formal processing. Minutes later, he emerged. He yielded to authorities, and a pair of handcuffs was placed on his wrists. The most famous fugitive in the world was officially in police custody. The immediate crisis was over. The bizarre 60-mile parade had ended peacefully, but the cultural shockwave it created was just getting started. Because on June 17, 1994, the news networks learned a multi-billion-dollar lesson. They discovered the ultimate formula. Reality, unscripted and playing out in real time, was infinitely more captivating than anything Hollywood could ever write. Before June 1994, news was something you watched for 30 minutes at dinner time. It was structured, scheduled, and highly polite. But the white Bronco proved a multi-billion-dollar point. Audiences would happily sit through hours of absolute nothingness, just waiting for a single moment of drama. Network executives realized they didn't need expensive scripts or highly paid actors to get record ratings. They just needed reality. Real people, real tension, unfolding completely live without a safety net. This single, slow-motion drive essentially served as the massive, unplanned pilot episode for the reality television era. It fundamentally rewired the American attention span. We developed an insatiable appetite for continuous, round-the-clock updates. In Los Angeles, local news stations permanently kept their helicopters fueled and ready, always hoping to catch the next great pursuit. Live car chases literally became a bizarre staple of regional programming, an afternoon distraction for millions of viewers. But more importantly, it completely and permanently erased the boundary between serious journalism and pure entertainment. News anchors were forced to become entertainers, and the tragic events they covered were treated like episodic television shows. This would become glaringly obvious in the months that followed, during what the media instantly dubbed the trial of the century. Lawyers transformed into household celebrities, and highly complex legal proceedings were broadcast daily like a massive daytime soap opera. The public literally picked sides, bought merchandise, and rooted for their favored legal teams exactly as if they were sports franchises. The white SUV didn't just carry a fallen star that evening. It carried the entire future of the media landscape inside its doors. It threw serious journalism and showbiz into a blender, hitting the puree button until nobody could tell the difference anymore. Today, looking back at that surreal summer evening in 1994, it feels like a bizarre fever dream. The actual white Ford Bronco itself eventually became a morbid museum artifact, a literal monument to our collective obsession. And that media obsession has only mutated and accelerated with the invention of the internet and the endless social media scroll. In many ways, we are all still chasing that same high. We are all still standing on that highway overpass, waiting for the next spectacle. But amidst all the flashing lights, the cheering crowds, and the massive ratings, we often forget the grim reality of why it all happened. At the absolute center of this media circus were two innocent lives that were brutally and tragically cut short. The spectacle entirely swallowed the tragedy. The entertainment value completely overshadowed the devastating human cost. And that might be the most terrifying, lasting legacy of the white Bronco highway chase. It proved that if you put enough flashing lights, cameras, and helicopters on a situation, even the absolute darkest moments of human reality can be casually consumed as light entertainment. So, the next time you find yourself absolutely glued to a live breaking news mega event, take a step back and ask yourself, are you watching to be informed Or are you just watching the show? Because the OJ Bronco chase didn't just break the news, it permanently rebuilt it. If you found this deep dive into media history fascinating, hit that subscribe button to join us for more. Until next time, keep your eyes open and try not to get lost in the spectacle. Thanks for watching.